શ્રી સ્વામિનારાયણ ભગવાનની જય, અક્ષર પુરુષોત્તમ મહારાજની જય, પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, મહંત સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજ શતાબ્દી મહોત્સવની જય. Looking at Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Jivan Charitra, and while we are studying it, we were journeying through Pramukh Swami Maharaj's childhood, and we were looking at pages 16 and 17. And so we will carry on from where we left off. For Shantilal, every time the Santos, Mandir was like a second home for him. And every time the sadhus came to the Mandir, Shantilal would be spending a lot of time at the Mandir as well. Mostly the sadhus that would come would be Puja Mota Akshar Swami, then Ghansham Swami, and Bal Mukund Swami. These were the three santos that would normally come to Chansad, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often visit them at the mandir at that time. While the santos were at the mandir, he would often learn bhajans, as we can see on the slide, Puja Mota Akshar Swami, then we see Ghansham Swami, and also Puja Bal Mukund Swami. And Swami spent a lot of time in the mandir with these santos. Every time he was in the mandir, he would engage himself in different types of seva. The santos would also teach him different types of bhajans. In particular, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often remember Joi Murti Manohar and Dayadu Prabhu Akshar Purushottam. These are the bhajans that the santos would often teach Shantilal as a young child. Pramukh Swami Maharaj often mentioned also that while he was in Chansad, he had also had an opportunity to meet some very senior Hari Bhaktos as well. Gal Bhai, Kalidas Bhai, Amtha Bhai, Murji Bhai, Vaidya, all these Hari Bhaktos he was very well acquainted with as well. There were three mandirs in the village as well at that time. The Ranchodrai Mandir, the Satyanarayan Mandir, and Hanuman Madi. These are the places where Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often go regularly to these mandirs also. And that's where he learned how to blow the conch, the shank. And he would often, in the Hanuman Mandir, he would often listen to the Katha of the Ramayana. There was a Babaji, his name was Haridas, and he would often narrate the Katha of the Ramayana. So Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often sit there, Shantilal would sit there and listen to these bhajans, to this Katha. Also, the chapter talks about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's attire. He would normally wear a cotton shirt and a dhoti. Sometimes he would wear a coat, and whenever he went to school, he would wear a pair of shorts. Some more information in this chapter is about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's friends. One of his friends, probably his best friend, was also called Shantilal. And he lived opposite to Pramukh Swami Maharaj's house. And these two friends were very close friends. They would study together. They also would often go to each other's houses as well, just like we would hear children today going to each other's houses. Similarly with Shantilal. But they would also go to the mandir together as well. Again, as I mentioned, there was a Baba in the mandir, in the Sitaram, in the Satyanarayan Mandir. His name was Sitaram. And he was normally the pujari, that used to do puja in the mandir over there. But often when they would sit together in the sabha, they would listen to talks about Haridwar and Rishikesh. And as teenagers, both these young teenagers would often wish that maybe in the future we too will leave Chansad and go and spend some time in Haridwar and Rishikesh and engage in the worship of Bhagwan. So many times Pramukh Swami Maharaj would also talk about this as well, that as a child they would often want to visit Haridwar and Rishikesh. In the mandir, the Ranchodrai Mandir, the Satyanarayan Mandir, and the Hanuman Madi, all these three mandirs, often people would engage in bhajans. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often love going to these mandirs to sing bhajans as well. He would accompany with the musical instruments. He would pick up the kartal or the kasi joda, and they would sing along. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would sing along bhajans with them as well. He would also play the drums as well, the tabla or the mridang. Sometimes the bhajans would run till late night, midnight sudipan, even up till 2 a.m. But Swami would participate. Shantilal would be there doing bhajans as well. Towards the end of these pages, there's also some more information about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Janmotri, or the birth chart. There was a Naranji Maharaj who was an astrologer, who also prophesied at that time. He said, this child will become very great. He will worship God and inspire countless to do the same. Crowds will throng for darshan, for which they would have to watch from a mile away. એટલે સ્વામી માટે તે વખતે પણ આટલી બધી પ્રોફેસી પણ કરેલી કે દૂર દૂરથી પણ પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજના દર્શન માટે પણ તે વખતે બધા આવશે. Pages 17 to 18, which we're looking at now. So Shantilal talks about Shantilal's studies and his time in school. So when Shantilal was in Chansad, he studied in Chansad at a school which was in the Patelwadi. The name of his headmaster was Chaganbhai Vipra. And normally the school hours would be from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Saturdays, school would end at 4 p.m. His classmates, generally, Swami listed many of his friends. There was a Chunilal, there was a Shantilal, there was a Bhailal Bhai, there was a Hari Bhai, Asha Bhai, Daya Bhai, many of his friends. Puja Vivek Sagar Swami once mentioned a very nice prasang where one of his friends who actually came to Atladra, and he was inquiring that I want to meet SM Patel, I want to meet SM Patel, and everybody was wondering, who is SM Patel, who is SM Patel? And SM Patel was, so he goes, I'm looking for Shanti Bhai Moti Bhai Patel. That was Pramukh Swami. But that was something new that we also got to hear once. But again, these were his friends, and they would all hang out together. One of his teachers' names was Hari Bhai. The reason I'm going through all these details is because even small details like this are very interesting for Bhaktas. Maharaj has mentioned in Gadra section 2, number 10, that Bhagwanna Divya Charitra and Prakrut Charitra. Bei Charitra, je Bhakta hoy, ene to game che. So even if they're divine exploits or even just seemingly simple exploits, but the Hari Bhakta who loves Bhagwan and his Guru would actually enjoy listening to any of such small details as well. So it's very nicely written in these books. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, his textbooks and notebooks, he would normally have to get them from Padra, which is a village nearby, a bigger city, or sometimes would have to go to Vadodara. He was a very excellent student, a brilliant student in his studies, and Swami would often stay up pretty much till late at night to study. He had a friend called Chunilal, so both of them would study together during exams. Swami would often mention that I would be there studying till about 1 a.m. in the morning sometimes, so pretty much burning the midnight oil. There was a very nice incident in these prasangs, page 17 to 19, about Makarpara station, where Pramukh Swami Maharaj had once gone to Makarpara station to meet Shastriji Maharaj. Shantilal must have been about the age of 10 during that time. And when they got to the station, Yogiji Maharaj, who was with Shastriji Maharaj at that time, noticed young Shantilal and said to Shastriji Maharaj, "Ke Swami, Chansad thi Muktaraj avya che. A Muktaraj from Chansad has come at that time." So at that time, Shastriji Maharaj then called Shantilal near him and he blessed Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Many decades later, Yogiji Maharaj very fondly remembered this, and he said that I took him to Shastriji Maharaj. I took Shantilal to Shastriji Maharaj. Kado coat peryo to ane dham dhum. He was wearing a black coat and was very well dressed. Yogiji Maharaj would reminisce this prasang during those days as well. Next, when we go on to page 19 and 20, basically the description is about his studies and what had actually happened during that time. While Shantilal was studying, as soon as they finished 5th grade, or standard 5, and because there weren't enough students, so the school had stopped. So Chansad wasn't offering 6th grade students, a school for 6th graders. And so, because Pramukh Swami Maharaj wanted to carry on studying, Shantilal wanted to carry on studying, he went from one place to another place looking for somebody who would actually be there to teach them. There was a village nearby, Darapara, and there was one gentleman who volunteered that I will take a class, but on one condition: you need to gather 10 to 12 students. If you can manage to do that, then I will take your 6th grade. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj then frantically started gathering people, and he got a group of 10 to 12 people to study. And then when he took all the students to the teacher, unfortunately the teacher said, "Well, we haven't got any student from my village, Darapara, so I won't teach anymore." And so all hopes to carry on studying from the 6th grade, that also stopped. Eventually they explored other options. His parents actually looked towards Bochasan. Now Bochasan was under the British rule during that time. And they were anybody who came from out of that jurisdiction would have to drop a year, which would mean that Pramukh Swami Maharaj would actually have to go into year 4. And so that wasn't going to happen. And so Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shantilal then decided to take a year off. And so one whole year, no studies were planned for that year. Pramukh Swami Maharaj does mention, in the book also it mentions, that what did he do during that year? Well, that whole year then Swami spent a lot of time traveling with the santos who used to come at that time. So he used that year to spend some time traveling with the santos as well, just so that while he was waiting for studies to start. He joined Puja Mota Akshar Swami, whose original name was Sadhu Akshar Purush Das, then Ghanshyam Swami and Balmukund Swami, who was there from Junagadh. Balmukund Swami, now all these 3 santos, Swami would travel with them. He would do all sorts of seva. He would have to go around begging for alms. Jodi mangwa mate pan Swami te wakhate jata. While you travel with the santos at that time, Swami would often have to also wash the utensils. And Akshar Swami was very particular about washing these utensils. Even the big utensils, he would make sure that Shantilal would wash them properly. And they used to use ash at that time, white ash, to wash the utensils at that time. And by accident, if even a little bit was left, then Akshar Swami would have this habit of throwing the utensils and telling him to wash again. Sometimes Swami would have, Shantilal would take about 2 hours just to wash the utensils. However, luckily, Balmukund Swami was very caring. And he would often look after Shantilal, would make sure that he would teach him how to cook. He would teach him how to wash the utensils. He would make sure that Shantilal had enough water as well to take a bath and everything. So he took good care of Shantilal. He actually taught him how to fetch water from a well. So these are some very interesting points that we get to read in the Jivan Charitra. As we move on to page 21, 22, A14 is what I'm talking about. This we can see in the slide. And Swami recounts many incidences when he was traveling with the santos. He would go to Anand. And Ghanshyam Swami would often ask Shantilal to go and ask for alms in Anand. But what would he ask him to bring? Pickles, athanu, papad, chash, makhan, debra, all these kind of things from Anand. And the street that Swami would have to go and beg for alms would be Revandasni Khadki. Now this is a very historical place, Revandas, the street of Revandas, because this is where Puja Mahant Sai Maharaj was. That's his main, that's where he's from. The Mahant Sai Maharaj's house is also in Revandasni Khadki. Puja Dr. Swami's house is also in Revandasni Khadki. Then Puja Ghanshyam Charan Swami, his house is also in Revandasni Khadki. So a very blessed street this is. Even Moti Bhagwan Das and his whole family, we have many satsangis who live in London as well, who are from that family, but they all live in this street. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often have to go there. Shantilal would often have to go there to beg for alms. Swami would often talk about one very interesting incident in this as well. Every time he would go there to beg, there was one particular house where there was this woman who would actually tease Shantilal a lot. And she would make fun of him, saying that, why are you traveling with the santos? Ghare kai khawanu nathi martu? Don't you have any food to eat? Did someone make fun of you? Is that why you want to leave and become a sadhu? Don't you have anybody? Haven't they found a nice girl for you to get married to? Things like that. She would tease Pramukh Shantilal like this as well. And he wasn't too fond of this. There was also another person who would actually make fun of Shantilal and would say that, look, if you become, and she would try to discourage him from becoming a sadhu, and would say that, look, if you do go to become a sadhu, it's not easy, it's very difficult, you won't last any day, you won't last any longer, you won't last for long enough. So these are the kind of things and the taunts that these women would make to Shantilal. So then Shantilal decided not to go beg for alms in these houses. Fortunately, there was another Hari Bhakta whose name was Bhula Bhai, who lived again in the same place. And if I'm not wrong, this is probably Puja Ghanshyam Charan Swami's family. And Bhula Bhai's son, Purushottam Bhai, he lived on that street. So his wife was very welcoming and would look after Shantilal a lot. She would actually call him into the house, give him some mathya to eat, and then give him some extra alms, and then send him off back to Shantilal. So these are some very nice reminiscing moments that are explained in this chapter as well. While he was in Anand, Swami would mention that he would often take a bath in the well that was there. There was a prasad in a well that was sanctified by Bhagwan Swaminarayan, so he would go there. Then also he talks about how Balmukund Swami would teach him how to draw water out of the well. Swami would also mention that people used to do a lot of sabha at that time. Shastriji Maharaj used to do katha, the santos used to do a lot of sabha, katha at that time as well. And so these are some days Swami would reminisce on these moments while he was in Anand. page 22 to 24, which is A15. While Swami would be traveling with the sadhus, Swami would have to go through a lot of different types of seva, and sometimes it was not always easy. But and then you also had to deal with Ghanshyam Swami. Now Ghanshyam Swami had a little bit of a strong personality, and so Swami, he would also tell Shantilal off sometimes if things weren't done properly. But Shantilal was very, very calm. Swami always said that from the beginning my nature was very calm. So he was always very, and I think many have witnessed Swami Shri being very calm. There was one incident that Swami would often recollect, and it is also very nicely written in the Jivan Charitra. Ghanshyam Swami had fallen ill, and he requested Shantilal, this was in Chansad, he had requested Shantilal to go and bring some draksh for him. Okay, so he said, "Ke tu mara mate draksh le auje." And he had to go all the way to Vadodara to go and get the grapes at that time. Draksh એટલે grapes. Now draksh has two meanings. Draksh can mean grapes, and it can also mean raisins. This was the first time that Shantilal was actually going to Vadodara, and Swami would often say that from my village to go to Chansad or to go to Vadodara was like going abroad. Back in the day, people wouldn't travel that much. And so this was, and every time he did have to go to Vadodara or to a bigger city, the little boy would actually, Shantilal would have to just sit there in the cart and look after the fodder, make sure that none of the sheep come and took the food away or anything like that. So never did he have to ever go shopping. So this was the first time he would actually go there to go and get something for Ghanshyam Swami. And he went and got some grapes. And as soon as he brought the grapes back to Ghanshyam Swami kind of got a little annoyed. And he said, "What's all this? Asu lai washu tu. Tarama buddhi nathi. Am che, tem che." He told him off a little bit. And as you can see, he had actually asked for raisins. Instead, Pramukh Swami Maharaj had went and got some grapes. It wasn't very clear, and Ghanshyam Swami hadn't clarified what he was supposed to get. So Swami often remembers this incident too. But Swami carried on doing his seva, because Swami did respect Ghanshyam Swami a lot at that time as well. As we move on to page number 24, there's a very nice incident about how he traveled with Puja Mota Akshar Swami. And they were traveling from Dabho, Goriad, Sakarda, Sokda, Nauli, Ashi, Pipradao, Gana, Radu, all these different villages. Eventually, they ended up in a village called Dungri Timbalat. And when they got there, they had visited a Hari Bhakt. His name was Prabhudas. So they stayed at Prabhudas's house. And after finishing the rituals over there, they were supposed to head off to Nainpur. And Akshar Swami said, "Look, we'll just walk. We'll make our way there." So Akshar Swami refused. Prabhudas, he actually offered them an oxen, a cart. That, "Look, why don't you take the oxen cart and you will go in the cart and we can drop you off over there." But Akshar Swami goes, No, I know the way. We'll go there and we'll make our way over there. They left at 4 p.m. Now Akshar Swami was very confident. Unfortunately, he took a wrong turn. And they kind of ended up getting lost, because as they carried on walking, they crossed the bridge which was just over the river Vatrak. And they got there, and Akshar Swami goes, "Oh, looks like we've come to the wrong place." They had actually ended up coming all the way to Memdavad. Now we can see that is almost a distance of about 7 to 8 kilometers. Now a huge detour they had taken, and they had to go back. Eventually they ended up getting back to Nainpur. They got there around 9 p.m. They left at 4 p.m. They were walking all the way there, and they got back there at 9 p.m. Eventually they were very hungry. Luckily, Puja Nirgun Swami was also there in Nainpur, and he eventually made some khichdi and chash for the santos and took care of them that way. But Swami would often remember these incidences. As we move on to A17, page 24 and 25, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often talk about this incident as well, that they had met Shastriji Maharaj in a nearby village near Vartal. And Shastriji Maharaj at that time encouraged Pramukh Swami Maharaj, because there was a Haribhakt by the name of Dada Bhai, who was from Bhadran, and he was going there to Vartal for darshan. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj recollects this incident as well, that how he had gone to Vartal. It wasn't the first time, but he had gone to Vartal, and he was very excited that he was going to Vartal for darshan, because this was a mandir that had been built by Bhagwan Swaminarayan. There was a there was a murti of Hari Krishna Maharaj that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had offered his prayers to as well. This was not the first time that he had been there. when Pramukh Swami Maharaj used to live in Rajnagar, Swami had often said that he was about 6 years old. That was the first time he had gone to Vartal. But nevertheless, this prasang is also mentioned in the Jivan Charitra on this page. As we move on to page 25, 26, again Swami's incident about how he had met Shastriji Maharaj in Vaso while they were traveling with Shastriji Maharaj at that time. And it was on the day of an Ekadashi that Shastriji Maharaj reminded everybody that Aaj Ekadashi che. And he encouraged Shantilal to do a Nirjala Upas, to observe a waterless fast. Now Shantilal was only about 15, 16 years old at that time. Nevertheless, he was very firm about it and he carried on. He successfully managed to complete the fast, the waterless fast, but it drained him completely. And then the next day, while he was asleep, Shantilal was woken up by Shastriji Maharaj. And Shastriji Maharaj had made some khichdi and chash for him as well. And so Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shantilal took some khichdi, took some chash with that khichdi. But because he wasn't feeling too well, it didn't stay in, and he actually had to, he threw it all out. And he ended up vomiting it all out. Nevertheless, then they gave him some milk, which was mixed with milk, with some mint. And then Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shantilal took some of that, which worked out well for him. But this was his first Nirjala Upwas. And for many decades, almost 6 decades later, Swami carried on doing Nirjala Upwas until his later years when he was when he fell ill. But he managed to carry on doing Nirjala Upwasis all the way till then. Shantilal would often reminisce and talk about the discourses in the village at that time. People used to gather together, they used to sit together. Shastriji Maharaj used to do a lot of katha at that time. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj would actually enjoy listening to that. And then he narrates one very nice incident where they had left from Vasa and they wanted to go to Nagasar with Shastriji Maharaj. They reached a village called Jakhwada and they got to the station around 8 p.m. at that time. Unfortunately, there was no one there to come and pick up Shastriji Maharaj. And so Shastriji Maharaj said then, okay, we'll have to go walking. Shastriji Maharaj was he was very elderly at that time. He had a walking stick with him. So he had a walking stick in one hand and he grabbed a devotee's hand in the other hand. And despite people started playing, let's wait for, Gadamate Rajwe, let's wait, people will bring some of the carts. But Shastriji Maharaj said, no, chali nakhe, let's just carry on walking. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj often remembers this incident. And they carried on walking for 2 hours until they got to Nagasar. They got there at 10 p.m. But this is the type of vichran that Shastriji Maharaj used to do. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj, as young Shantilal, had an opportunity to accompany Shastriji Maharaj during those travels as well. When Shantilal got to Ahmedabad, there was a very nice incident that he mentions that they got to Ahmedabad and Shantilal had witnessed, they had gone to a place called Rangilapur in Ahmedabad. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj often mentioned that as a young child, they had got an opportunity to witness Jethiba, who used to go into Samadhi at that time. And he also had the opportunity to meet Gulzalilal Nanda, who would later on become the caretaker Prime Minister of India at that time. Gulzalilal Nanda was a very staunch devotee of Shastriji Maharaj, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj recounts that incident too. As we move on to page 26 and 27, again, very nice incident about this while Swami was in Bochasan. So, Swami would talk about how he knew some Haribhaktas as well. There was a Haribhakt by the name of Datram Barot, and his two children, Amrut and Gansham. Swami goes, I used to play with those boys at that time. They often recount that prasang as well. Now, there was a very nice incident at that time that Akshar Swami at that time wanted to give Pramukh Swami Maharaj Parshad Diksha and initiate him. And so he mentioned this to to Shantilal. But Shantilal knew that Shastriji Maharaj was just around the corner and he was going to come there for Guru Punam. So he requested, he said, shall we just wait till Shastriji Maharaj comes and then we can speak to him and then take Diksha. And so nevertheless, 15 days later, Shastriji Maharaj was there. But what had happened was, while they were waiting for Shastriji Maharaj, Akshar Swami decided to prepare a KDU, which is like an overcoat or a shirt that you would wear, that Parshads would wear at that time. As soon as Shantilal found out that Akshar Swami had prepared a KDU for him, he went and hid. Because as soon as the KDU had come, Akshar Swami wanted him to try it on. And Shantilal was in no mood to try the KDU on. So he went and hid in the farm. And then they waited, and then eventually the tailor left because he was going to prepare it. He wanted to take measurements for Shantilal. But eventually, the tailor decided to walk away. Eventually, then when Shantilal came back, Akshar Swami asked him, "Where were you? Why, I was looking for you. Where did you disappear to?" And I wanted to give you a kedu. And Shantilal very politely but was very firm. He says, "Look, forget the kedu. I don't want to wear this kedu. Let's just wait till Shastriji Maharaj came." And that way he sort of walked away from that. Nevertheless, when Shastriji Maharaj came, Akshar Swami explained this whole incident to Shastriji Maharaj. And Shastriji Maharaj then said, "Look, he's a very good boy. He's going to become a sadhu one day." In fact, Shastriji Maharaj did mention that I had my eye on him ever since he was a child, that we had decided that we wanted him to become a sadhu at that time as well. While they were in Bochasan, Shastriji Maharaj called Shantilal once over. And he wanted him to study the Shabda Rupavali, which is probably the first class that you do while you're in first Sanskrit classes. And there are various forms of the Rup Ramaha that you have to recite and remember. And Shantilal was very quick. As soon as Shastriji Maharaj gave him this homework, within half an hour, he memorized the entire Shabda Rupavali of the Rama Rupa. And Shastriji Maharaj was so happy. And he said to him, he says, "You know what? You are capable of becoming a great scholar one day. You will become a Shastri one day. You're very clever indeed. As a sadhu, you will shine out. As we move on to page 27, 28, two very nice incidences again. While Swami was in Bochasan, Shantilal was in Bochasan, and he remembers an incident when there was a sadhu by the name of Sri Haridas who used to live in Bochasan as well. He was a very aged sadhu. He had actually had an opportunity to serve Gunatidan Swami too. Unfortunately, every time Shantilal would sit with him, Sri Haridas would speak very discouragingly to Shantilal about becoming a sadhu. And he would say, "Look, it's not worth becoming a sadhu. There's just too much work over here. It's better you remain at home and stay, karma rene tame bhakti karjo. No one's going to look after you over here." So he was very discouraging the way he said this. And so Shantilal was very horrified to hear such words. He had never heard anything like this. However, as soon as Shastriji Maharaj heard that Shantilal had, been associating or spent some time with Sri Haridas, he advised him and told him, don't associate with such people. He speaks very discouragingly and keep away from him. So he warned him about this as well. So Shantilal would regularly stay in touch, as in he would page lagwa jai Sri Hari Swami ne, but wouldn't listen to any of his talks as well. And there was another incident about this Haribhakt by the name of Prabhudas Barot, who also lived in Bochasan. Now this elderly man, he believed that he could place other people into samadhi. And he would also preach accordingly and talk to other people as well. However, it wasn't true that he could do so. He was just trying his luck. And anybody who came nearby, he would tell them, "Look, you want to try some samadhi? I'll do it." So Shantilal, one day must have been walking past, and he saw this guy, and he found out, "What are you doing?" And so he told Prabhudas, "What are you doing?" And Prabhudas said, "Look, come, I'll teach you how to do samadhi." So Shantilal very inquisitively sat there, cross-legged, and he says, "Look, I'll put you into a trance after 10 minutes. And told him to close his eyes. So here Shantilal, sitting in Bochasan in the Sabha Mandap, he had his eyes closed, Palati Varina, he was just sitting there. And it just so happened at that time that Nirgun Swami walked past. And it's so funny that Nirgun Swami happened to walk past. Nirgun Swami, was a very strong personality, and he saw Shantilal sitting there. And so suddenly he woke him up and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, this man is teaching me how to do samadhi." So Nirgun Swami goes very upset. He says, "Look, forget all this samadhi. Walk away from here, and I'll take you." And he told the other Prabhudas Bhai, he says, "Look, stop teaching them some silly things like this." And eventually, he told Shastriji Maharaj, "Okay, your shishya, he's sitting there trying to do samadhi." And so eventually, when Shantilal went to meet Shastriji Maharaj, so Shastriji Maharaj asked him, "Su karto tha, what were you doing?" And Shantilal explained that, I was sitting there, just this man was teaching me how to do samadhi. And Shastriji Maharaj started laughing, and he says, "So what does he teach you in samadhi?" And he says, "Well, you close your eyes and you have to try and meditate, and you see the murti of Shastriji Maharaj, and then you attain the bliss of Akshardham in this kind of samadhi." Then Shastriji Maharaj told him, "Tare to samadhi already chej. You already have samadhi." And he added saying, "Aa murti tari sathe je che." He added that, Shastriji Maharaj ni murti to tari same je che. શાસ્ત્રીમાં તારી સામે જ છે અને અક્ષરધામનું સુખ પણ તને કાયમ છે જ. So this is the unbroken happiness that you can experience all the time. And so Shantilal would often remember this prasang. But these are some of the incidences that we hear, and this is the kind of samadhi that Shastriji Maharaj taught Shantilal, કે શાસ્ત્રીજી મહારાજની સ્મૃતિ કરવી, એમનું ધ્યાન ધરવું, એ જ સમાધિ. As we end today's chapters, we will carry on with the lessons next week. Thank you very much.